relevant question, especially when you think about what is called global citizenship education, which is a kind of buzzword in the UN as well. Global citizenship education has mainly two elements. One is universal values. You know, what is universal values? We need to identify them. For example, human rights are certainly universal value. We all want to live with human dignity. So human rights are important for all of us. For example, saving the earth from climate change is a universal value. If we don't have the earth, we don't have anywhere to live. So for our survival, we need the earth. We need to save it, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said there is no plan B because there is no planet B. We don't have planet B, so there is no plan B. We have to live on it, continue to live on this planet. So that's certainly one of the universal values. The other element of global citizenship education is respect for diversity. In the world we have people with different cultures, using different languages, different religions, different background. And by nature, humans don't like people who are different from them. You are not comfortable when you are with someone who is totally different from you, who speak totally different language, who look totally different. You are not very comfortable. So getting along with people who are different is not in our nature. We have to develop it. As I said, your grandfathers never met Koreans, my grandfathers never met Indonesians. But these days, we are meeting each other, not only meeting, but we are working together, we are cooperating with each other. If we cannot do that, we have a big problem. So you better respect people who are different from you. That's the other element of global citizenship. And then, as you pointed out, sometimes there are these problems. Because universal values sometimes conflict with diversity. For example, in Muslim countries like Indonesia, ladies wear scarf, hijab. That should be part of culture that should be respected. Wearing a hijab doesn't do any harm to anyone. It's their culture. But let's say in some countries, this really happened. In some countries, I'm not going to name it, but in some countries, girls who are 14 years old should stop education and should work. Boys can continue, but girls should stop at 14 years old. Is it part of culture? I don't think so. It's human rights violation. If girls cannot continue education when they are 14 years old, they will never be able to compete with boys. Then women should live as a secondary citizen in society for the rest of her life. This is not fair. This is human rights violation that cannot be part of culture that should be respected. For example, female circumcision, is it culture to be respected or human rights violation? You decide for yourself. Honor killing, if you have a family member, a woman who did something not very honorable, the father or brother can kill her. Honor killing is a part of culture or is human rights violation? Very difficult questions, right? But there should be distinction. You should draw a line somewhere. Not everything can be part of culture to be respected.
Let's get a question from the back row in the black suit. Please.
So I'm Brian from Suzhou Foreign Language School, and I actually have two questions. The first one is since the United Nations have 5 permanent members, and those five states are chosen from the winning members of the Second World War. So I think, is it necessary for the United Nations to reform its permanent members? Because over several decades, there has been major economic changes, and some countries have been gaining influences over the world or in the United Nations. And the second question is that since there are, I'm personally supportive of the United Nations, but I do believe that some regional organizations is also very important to be considered. So how can the cooperation to be made more efficient within the two forces? Thank you.
The first question about UN reform is quite important. The United Nations, when it was created in 1945, as I explained to you, they learned lessons from the forerunner of the United Nations, which was called the League of Nations. The League of Nations failed in preventing a war. That's how the Second World War broke out. And people realized that one important reason for failure of League of Nations was that great powers, big powers, did not have privileges. In reality, even though all states are considered equal in terms of their sovereignty, in reality, there are countries that have bigger national power, that have a larger population. I sometimes ask this question. If all states are equal, then are all human beings equal too? Which is more important? Is human equality is more important than state equality? If you believe human equality is more important, then how come a country like China, that has 1.3 billion population, has the same right as some small island country that has only 30,000 people? If China and this small island country has the same power, equal in their power, then one Chinese person is much less powerful than one person in this island country. You see what I mean? So that's why I think sometimes I feel human equality is more important than state equality. But anyway, in 1945, the United Nations was trying to give privileges to countries that are powerful, whether because these countries have large population or whether these countries have strong military power or economic power. So they gave privileges to 5 countries. They are China, France, UK, US, and Russia. So these countries are permanent members of the Security Council, and they can always veto any decision made by the Security Council. And Security Council is the only UN organ that can make binding decisions on stage. All other organs like General Assembly or Economic and Social Council are making only recommendations, not binding. So the most powerful organ in the UN is Security Council, and they have 15 members, and 5 of them are permanent members with veto power. But the way I see it, they overdid it. It was a good idea to give privileges to great powers, but they overdid it. Why? Because they wrote names of these countries in stone. You cannot change it. But actually, power changes over time. Some countries are powerful now, but maybe not powerful in 50 years. But the way the UN Charter is written, you cannot change it, even if reality changes. That's the problem of UN Charter. That's how UN reform is difficult. These 5 countries don't want to give up their privileges. Some other countries that think we want to have privileges because we are now great powers, they cannot have that. So the way I see it, we should come up with more institutional way of assessing different power of member states, and we should have a more effective way of recognizing difference in stage.
We'll take another question for the back row. Yes, brown suits, yes.
Good morning, Ambassador Ong. I'm Tang Han Shin from Hwa Chong Institution, Singapore. So allow me to pose 2 questions. The first one is one that I've noted from your last slide. You mentioned that amongst the UN contributions to the humanitarian aid to North Korea, in 2016, South Korea actually stopped. And I would like to ask what's the reason for that. So the second question is a bit vaguer. I understand that international politics are often shaped and influenced by domestic politics, such as in the case of US, for instance. And a lot of the domestic politics are like one level down. It is influenced by the civil societies. It's influenced by other social forces in the society. So my question at large is, say we don't go through the platform of the UN, as an individual, how can I contribute to the common agenda of the globe without recourse through diplomacy or governance? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Your first question, what was the first question? Oh, yeah, thank you. North Korea is one of the handful of countries in the United Nations that are getting humanitarian assistance every year, perennially. So every year the UN comes up with what is called the humanitarian appeal, meaning they have expectation for humanitarian needs every year. Nobody knows whether there will be flood or there will be bad harvest, but from your past experience, you can estimate what kind of humanitarian assistance you might need this year. So every year they come up with humanitarian appeal. Usually humanitarian appeal for North Korea is around $100 million a year. But after North Korean nuclear issue started, the donors don't want to contribute their money for North Korea. Even though I think we should separate these political security issues from humanitarian issue, but still a lot of donors don't like that idea. So until 2015, South Korea was the largest donor because all other donors kind of dropped out. So there were only a few donors in 2013, 14, and 15. So South Korea was the largest donor. But 2016, we stopped providing donation, and I think that was a mistake. I think we should have continued with humanitarian assistance, no matter what. But we stopped because the North Korean nuclear issue became so serious, and probably some people in Korea, in South Korea, some conservative people thought that we shouldn't do anything that might harm North Korea. So that's why we stopped. And what was the second question? Sorry.
To summarize it's based on the assumption that individual actions and decisions outside of the political.
I got it, yeah. In this age of globalization, you are all whatever you are doing, you are always an international player. You know, I sometimes tell Korean students that no matter what you are going to do in your life, you will be competing with people in other countries. You know, some people say, "Oh, I'm working in a bicycle factory, for example, and my factory, the bicycles produced in my factory are only for domestic consumption in South Korea. So we don't export. How come I'm competing with other countries?" You are still competing with other countries, people in other countries, because if your factory cannot produce bicycles, you know, cheap enough and good enough, then people will import bicycles from China, from Taiwan, from all over the world. Then your company will go down. So you have to make good bicycles at low cost. So you are competing with companies or factories in China, in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Singapore, whether you like it or not. So all